Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes over the quiet Ohio suburb, coating the streets and rooftops in a soft, muffled white. 7-year-old Lily Harper tugged her worn scarf tighter around her neck, her small boots crunching against the icy sidewalk. She'd been on her way home from school when something unusual caught her eye near the trash bins at the end of the cul-de-sac. At first, she thought it was a stray coat or discarded bag, but as she drew closer, the movement made her pause. Two shapes stirred weakly under a thin layer of snow, dogs. They were thin, impossibly thin, with ribs jutting sharply against their matted fur. The smaller one's front paw trembled violently, as if it could no longer support its weight. The larger dog shivered from head to tail, ice forming in its fur, making it glisten unnaturally in the gray afternoon light. Lily's heart clenched. She had always loved animals, but this was different. These dogs were suffering, and she could not leave them out there. Her hands shook as she bent down. "Hey, it's okay," she whispered, trying to coax them closer. Their eyes, a mix of fear and pain, watched her warily. The smaller dog whimpered, a high, brittle sound that made Lily's chest ache. She glanced around. The street was deserted. Snowflakes settled on her eyelashes. She tugged off her coat, shivering herself, and knelt in the snow. Wrapping it carefully around the larger dog first, she murmured, "I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you." Slowly, almost cautiously, the dogs allowed her to nudge them toward the warmth of her home. By the time Lily reached the front porch, the two dogs were barely moving. She lifted the smaller one first, struggling under its weight, feeling bones through the frost-hardened fur. The larger dog followed reluctantly, stumbling but determined to keep close to her. Lily's little arms ached. Every step toward the door felt longer than the last. She dropped her scarf and her backpack, fumbling with the keys she wore around her neck. Her fingers were numb, almost clumsy with cold. Finally, the door opened, and she practically stumbled inside, dropping the dogs onto the carpet. Her small house was silent. Her mother, a nurse, was at work on the late shift. Lily's father had passed away the year before, leaving her and her mother to navigate life alone. She lit the fireplace with trembling hands, stacking logs carefully while the dogs huddled against the hearth. One dog pressed its face into her chest, trembling uncontrollably. The other lay flat, eyes half closed, seemingly trying to disappear into the carpet. Lily's mind raced. She had no idea where they came from, and the snow had already erased their tracks. For all she knew, no one would come looking for them. And yet, something about them didn't feel like ordinary strays. Hours passed. Lily pulled out a small blanket from the hall closet and wrapped both dogs. She whispered soft reassurances, stroking their fur. The larger dog let out a low, cautious growl at first but eventually relaxed, resting its head on her lap. She noticed faint markings on their fur, nearly invisible through the mud and ice. Tiny numbers tattooed behind one ear, faded symbols along the spine. Her stomach twisted. "What happened to you?" she asked aloud, voice breaking. The smaller dog whimpered again, looking at her with eyes that seemed to ask the same question. Lily tried to feed them, offering scraps of bread and water from the kitchen. The larger dog sniffed the food, then sniffed her hand and then slowly ate. The smaller one licked the water hesitantly, as though unsure it was safe. Night fell and the house grew colder. Lily wrapped herself around the dogs on the living room rug, her pajamas no match for the lingering winter chill. She could hear the wind rattling the window panes, carrying a distant, eerie howl from somewhere beyond the yard. Something about the sound made her tense. The wind wasn't alone. She glanced toward the window, eyes straining through the dim light, but saw only the snow, thick and endless. Sleep came reluctantly. Lily lay there half-conscious, listening to the soft breathing of the dogs, feeling their warmth seep into her frozen body. Her mind refused to stop racing. What if someone came looking for them? What if they were dangerous? The markings she'd seen, they weren't ordinary, but at the same time she felt an inexplicable bond forming. They had trusted her when no one else had. They had survived in the snow and ice, and somehow that had saved them. Somewhere outside, hidden in the shadows behind a thick stand of trees, a pair of eyes watched. They had been following the dogs for days, waiting, tracking, knowing that the slightest misstep could cost them everything. The figure shifted silently, boots crunching imperceptibly on frozen leaves under the snow. Inside, Lily shifted in her sleep, one arm over the larger dog, the smaller one pressed against her chest. Outside, the wind carried a soft metallic glint, and a radio crackled faintly in the distance. The watchers had not expected a child to intervene, and yet here she was. As the first faint light of dawn touched the snow-covered rooftops, Lily stirred awake. The dogs were calm now, asleep against her legs. She rubbed their fur gently, marveling at their survival through the night. But her eyes, wide with curiosity, scanned the window again. The shadows were gone, or so it seemed. Her chest tightened with a sudden, unexplainable sense of foreboding. Something had changed overnight. She had saved the dogs from the cold, yes, but had she also brought something else into the house with them? Her mother's keys jingled in the distance as she approached the street. Lily didn't notice. She was focused entirely on the dogs, gently brushing the ice from their coats, speaking in whispers. And then, without warning, sirens began wailing, distant at first, then growing louder, closer, until the walls seemed to vibrate with their urgency. Lily froze, the dogs instinctively pressing closer to her. Red and blue lights danced across the living room walls. She didn't understand. She had only wanted to help, but now, it seemed, the world outside had noticed what she had done. The dogs lifted their heads, ears pricked, tails stiff. They sensed it before she did. Something was coming, something serious. Lily's small hands tightened on the blankets, and then the knocking began, a loud, deliberate pounding on the front door, each thud shaking her bones. The dogs growled low, warning, protective. Lily's stomach dropped. She had no idea who was outside. She only knew one thing with absolute certainty: her life, her quiet neighborhood, and her little world would never be the same again. And as the knocking continued, Lily whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "Please, just don't take them away." The pounding on the front door grew louder, more insistent, as Lily's small hands trembled around the blankets. The dogs pressed closer, growls rumbling from deep in their chests. She could hear muffled shouts and the unmistakable clink of metal, the sharp, professional sounds of law enforcement gearing up outside. Her stomach twisted. She had only wanted to save them from the snow. Only wanted to help. Now it felt as though the world itself had turned against her. "Lily Harper," a booming voice called from the street. "Step away from the animals." It wasn't a friendly voice. It carried authority, danger, and an invisible line she was warned not to cross. The dogs stiffened, ears forward, tails brushing her legs. Lily's eyes darted to the window, where the neighborhood street was suddenly alive with flashing lights, red, blue, and white reflections bouncing across snow-covered cars and mailboxes. A police cruiser sat on the curb, engine idling. Officers braced with hands near holsters, tense eyes scanning her house. She backed toward the fireplace, wrapping herself tightly around the dogs. I didn't do anything wrong," she stammered. Her voice was small, shaking, yet defiant. She felt the larger dog press its head into her shoulder like a shield against the world outside. The smaller one whimpered as if sensing the storm about to break. Lily's mind raced. What had she brought inside? Who were these people? One officer stepped closer to the front door, lowering his voice to speak into a radio. "Target in position," he murmured. The language was foreign to Lily, serious, urgent, almost frightening. A helicopter's whirring blades cut through the winter air, circling above the neighborhood, casting a moving shadow across her living room wall. Snow swirled outside like a ghostly curtain, hiding who or what might be out there. Lily hugged the dogs tighter, whispering, "It's okay, it's okay," even as her own heart thudded in panic. A soft bark escaped the larger dog, almost a warning. Lily noticed faint, faded tattoos beneath the matted fur, numbers etched into their skin, strange symbols barely visible. Her stomach turned. These weren't stray dogs. These weren't pets abandoned in the snow. Something about the markings whispered danger. And yet, despite their worn, cold bodies, they trusted her. They had chosen her as their protector. The front door rattled violently. "Step away," the voice barked again. Then came the sound of a metallic click, the unmistakable sound of a weapon being readied. Panic surged through Lily. She looked at the dogs, eyes wide, desperate for guidance. The larger dog growled low and steady, a sound that vibrated in her chest. She realized in a sudden, chilling moment that the animals understood more than she could. They were ready. The knocking intensified, pounding with military precision. Lily's mother's car screeched into the driveway, snow kicking up in angry clouds behind it. Lily's heart leapt. Relief flickered. Her mother would protect her. But then the car stopped too far from the house. Two officers moved forward, positioning themselves between her mother and the front steps. Her mother's face was pale, eyes wide with horror as she saw the flashing lights and the array of weapons aimed at her daughter's home. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. She had wanted to help, and now her mother's safety and her own was at risk. An agent knelt near the front porch, keeping the dogs in his peripheral vision. His face was tight with urgency. He leaned toward Lily, voice low, almost a whisper, yet filled with awe. "Those dogs, they're federal property," he said. "They're missing, stolen, likely for weeks. They're trained for detection, high-level law enforcement. And you've just found them." Lily's head spun. "Stolen? Detection? What do you mean?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. The officer glanced toward the street where the helicopter circled lower, its spotlight scanning the yard, then back at Lily. "These aren't ordinary dogs," he said. "They're valuable and dangerous to be without the right handlers. You've put yourself at risk." Her stomach sank. Lily's small chest heaved. She had saved them from the cold. She had wrapped them in blankets, given them warmth. And yet, now she understood how serious this was. The moment she had opened her door, she had stepped into a storm she couldn't see fully, one that reached far beyond her quiet neighborhood. The knocking stopped suddenly. Silence fell, heavy, tense, almost suffocating. Then a new sound, a metallic crunch from the backyard, snow compressing beneath heavy boots. A voice barked something unintelligible, then another voice, sharp, urgent. The dogs' ears perked, tails stiffened. They rose simultaneously, muscles coiled, eyes sharp. Lily clutched their collars, realizing with a jolt they were not just scared, they were ready. A team of officers, weapons raised, moved quickly through the front yard, entering the living room with precision. Their boots made soft thuds against the carpet. "Step back, Lily," one ordered. The dogs, surprisingly calm but alert, stayed at her side. The larger one's nose twitched, sniffing as if recognizing an unseen threat beyond the humans. The agent who had whispered to her stepped forward again, kneeling to her level. "You did good," he murmured. "You saved them. But now we need to get them to safety." Lily shook her head violently. "No, they stayed with me. They didn't leave me outside in the cold." The smaller dog whimpered, pressing closer. The larger dog nudged her hand gently, protective, almost comforting. The officer's expression softened slightly, but urgency remained. "I know, kid, I know. But we have reason to believe there's more danger coming. Criminals, people who wanted these dogs, they might come back. We have to move fast." Outside, the sound of engines, snow tires crunching on ice, and helicopter blades sliced through the crisp morning air. Another officer whispered into a radio, voice tight with tension. "All units be advised, suspect may still be in the area. Approach with extreme caution. Do not engage without backup." The words were meant for others, but Lily's ears caught them. Her stomach turned. "I don't understand. Why would anyone want them?" she whispered to herself, voice trembling. The agent glanced at her, expression grim. "They're trained for things most people don't even know exist. Detection, security, search operations. These dogs are more than pets. And now, because of you, they're alive and alert. That's dangerous for the people who took them." A soft bark from the larger dog cut through the tension. It was almost deliberate, a warning. The smaller dog whimpered again, shifting closer to Lily's side. Her mother's voice cut through the snow outside. "Lily, are you okay?" Her words were frantic, panicked, full of fear for her daughter. But Lily didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the dogs, on the instincts they were showing, the strange intelligence shining through their eyes. Then, without warning, a sudden crack echoed from the woods behind the yard. Snowflakes tumbled through the air like frozen sparks. Officers spun, weapons drawn, hearts hammering. The dogs growled, moving in front of Lily protectively. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Someone else knew exactly where the dogs were. Someone else had been watching. The moment stretched, tense and frozen, as the snow swirled. Lily held her breath, the dogs pressed to her sides, ears forward, muscles taut. Outside, the world had shifted. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, saving two freezing dogs, had become something much larger, something dangerous, something she could never have imagined. And as she glanced up at the flashing lights and the officers moving cautiously through her home, Lily realized one terrifying truth: nothing would ever be normal again. The tension inside Lily's living room was suffocating. Snow spun against the windows like tiny shards of glass, reflecting the red and blue strobe of the police lights outside. The dogs pressed close, alert, their fur bristling. Lily clutched their collars, trying to calm them, trying to calm herself. She could hear officers moving cautiously through the house, soft footsteps, whispered commands. But one agent, different from the others, older, with a sharp edge to his gaze, stepped closer to her. He knelt carefully, meeting her wide, terrified eyes. "Lily," he said gently, "I need to tell you something. Those dogs you found, they're not just stray animals." Lily's heart thumped. "Not stray," she whispered. "No," the agent continued. "They're trained federal K9s, elite detection dogs. They were stolen several weeks ago. People have been looking for them, and now, because of you, they're safe, but it's dangerous." The words sank slowly, cold as the snow outside. Lily's small mind spun. Stolen? Detection. The larger dog growled low, almost in agreement with him, muscles coiling as if ready to leap. The smaller dog whimpered, pressing against Lily's leg. The agent's voice dropped further. "These dogs, what you see, they're used to detect explosives, narcotics, even human remains. They're highly trained. And someone took them because they wanted to use them illegally, or worse." Lily felt her stomach twist. She had only wanted to help. She had wrapped them in blankets, fed them, given them warmth. And now, suddenly, everything felt heavier. She glanced at the tattoos on their fur, numbers, symbols, and realized with a jolt that the agent wasn't lying. They weren't ordinary pets. They were tools, weapons, lives at risk. Another officer spoke into a radio, voice low but urgent. "Target, inside the residence. Confirmed K9s recovered. Repeat, K9s are present. Approach with caution." The words crackled in the air, strange and frightening. Lily didn't understand all of it, but the tone alone made her shiver. The situation was bigger than she could imagine. Her mother finally pushed through the flurry of officers into the living room, face pale and eyes wide with fear. She ran to Lily, but two officers gently held her back. "Mom," Lily cried, "don't leave me." Her mother's voice shook. "Lily, I don't understand. What's happening?" Before Lily could answer, the older agent stepped in, looking from mother to daughter with a mix of respect and urgency. "Ma'am," he said, "your daughter did the right thing. She protected these dogs, but these animals, because of who took them, have made this house a high-priority area. They could be targeted again at any moment. That's why we're here, to protect everyone." The dogs shifted, ears twitching, muscles tensing. The larger one moved protectively to stand between Lily and the officers. The agent raised a hand in a gesture of reassurance. "They know you," he said softly. "They respond to her, they trust her, and right now that's keeping them calm." Lily's mother's eyes filled with tears. "Lily, you saved them," she whispered, "but you have no idea what you're involved in." Suddenly, the helicopter above dipped lower, its spotlight cutting across the room. The dogs stiffened, growling low. One officer looked toward the window, squinting. "Movement. Something's approaching from the tree line behind the property," he said, voice tense. "Could be the suspects. They may be watching the house." Lily pressed closer to the larger dog, who licked her cheek almost comfortingly. She didn't know what to do. She wanted to run, hide, but the officers blocked every exit. And in her chest, something primal told her these dogs were not afraid. They understood the danger. They had a plan. The older agent knelt closer to her again. "Lily, you need to stay calm. You did something incredible last night. You saved lives, maybe more than you realize." He glanced at the dogs. "They've been trained for extreme situations, and right now they're keeping you safe." Outside, muffled shouts rose over the sound of wind and helicopter blades. Someone or some group was close. The officers whispered into radios, giving updates, their voices clipped and professional. The dogs responded almost immediately, ears forward, muscles tight, growls vibrating through their bodies. The smaller dog shifted, scanning the room, tail stiff. The larger dog's eyes were fixed on the front door, unwavering, unflinching. Then came the sudden sound of a branch snapping, a harsh crack that echoed across the yard. Every officer tensed, weapons rising instinctively. Lily clutched the dogs, her tiny hands shaking. The older agent motioned to her mother to step back, voice tight. "They know we have the dogs. If these criminals try anything at all, they'll be ready. And so will we." The moment stretched, taut, frozen in suspense. Lily realized she was holding her breath, feeling the gravity of the situation in her bones. This wasn't just about snow or cold or stray animals. This was about power, about trained dogs stolen from the people who used them for life-saving missions, about criminals willing to take anything or anyone to get what they wanted. The larger dog moved slightly, pressing against Lily's leg as if sensing her fear. The smaller one whimpered softly but stayed close. Lily realized then she wasn't just protecting the dogs. They were protecting her too, and that realization brought a strange mix of fear and awe. The older agent straightened, speaking firmly into a radio. "Confirm the perimeter. No approach without authorization. The suspects are armed, dangerous, and aware of K9 presence. Keep everyone safe inside." Lily's mother grabbed her hand tightly, finally close enough to hug her. "You're safe," she whispered, but Lily could feel the tremor in her mother's voice. The danger was still real. The snow outside reflected flashing lights and shadows, and she understood. Whatever had been chasing these dogs, tracking them for weeks, was still out there. And now they knew where the dogs were. A sudden movement in the corner of the yard drew every officer's attention. The dogs growled, low and warning, their bodies coiled. Lily pressed herself against the larger dog instinctively, feeling the warmth and strength of its muscles beneath her small hands. She realized the bond she shared with them was more than instinct. It was trust, survival, connection. The agents moved silently, communicating with gestures, weapons ready. Lily watched, heart pounding. She didn't understand everything, but she knew one truth. Her small act of kindness, saving 2 freezing, shivering dogs from the snow, had thrown her life into a whirlwind she could never have imagined. And then a voice crackled over the radio, possible sighting of suspect at the tree line. "They're armed. Repeat, armed. Engage with caution." The dogs stiffened, tails raised, growls vibrating through the room. Lily's stomach dropped. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that whatever it was coming, and the dogs would be ready. Her heart raced, breath shallow, as the snow outside turned to a blur of movement and flashing lights. The storm, literal and metaphorical, was closing in. Lily squeezed the collars, whispering almost to herself, "Please, don't let anything happen." And in that tense, frozen moment, she realized. Last night she had saved the dogs. Tonight they would save her. The wind howled through the trees behind Lily's house, rattling the windows and carrying the faint, sinister scent of something metallic, gunpowder maybe, or steel. Inside, Lily pressed herself against the larger dog, whose warmth and steady breathing kept her anchored. The smaller dog whimpered softly but remained alert, ears twitching toward every sound outside. The officers moved in perfect silence, weapons raised, eyes scanning every shadow. Lily had never felt so small, so exposed, and yet so protected. The dogs, trained to detect danger she couldn't even see, radiated focus and readiness. "Mom, I'm scared," Lily whispered, clutching the larger dog's fur. Her mother, eyes wide and pale, pressed a hand to her shoulder. "I know, baby, I know." But even as she spoke, her gaze flicked toward the windows, the yard, the tree line where movement had been reported moments before. Snowflakes swirled in the cold air, reflecting the flashing red and blue lights from the police cruisers parked along the street. Lily felt her chest tighten. This was no longer about saving 2 dogs from freezing. This was about survival. An officer knelt beside Lily again, the one who had first whispered to her about the dogs. "Lily," he said, voice low but urgent, "you need to listen. These dogs, they've been through training you wouldn't believe. They can sense danger, track people, detect explosives and narcotics. That's why the people who stole them wanted them. They're dangerous in the wrong hands, and right now you have them. That makes this house a target." Lily's stomach dropped. "Target," she whispered. The larger dog nudged her gently, as if urging her to stay calm. "Yes," the agent said, glancing at the dogs. "Target. The people who took them, they didn't want anyone to find them. They would come back, and they might not care about anyone in the way. That includes you, Lily. That includes your mom." Outside, the sound of crunching snow grew louder. The tree line shifted. Shadows moved, tall, quick, almost predatory. Officers raised their weapons, radioing for backup. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath short and shallow. She could feel the dog's tension radiating like electricity. The larger one pressed against her side, ears forward, eyes scanning the room. The smaller one's tail twitched, muscles coiled. They were ready. A sudden crack of ice broke the silence outside. A figure darted from the tree line, almost invisible in the snowfall, sliding dangerously on the frozen ground. The officers shouted, aiming weapons, while the dogs erupted with sudden, precise energy. The larger dog barked sharply, lunging toward the approaching figure, teeth bared but not yet attacking. The smaller dog followed, skittering along the carpet, muscles tense, warning snarls vibrating through the room. Lily's stomach churned. These were no ordinary dogs. One officer shouted, "Get down," as a second figure appeared, crouching low, moving quickly toward the backyard fence. The dogs growled in unison, eyes locked on the intruders. Lily pressed herself against the floor, heart hammering. Snow crunched closer. The agents exchanged tense glances, knowing that any wrong move could escalate the situation. Then a loud, metallic clink, a weapon being readied, echoed across the yard. One of the intruders had slipped, his footing precarious on the ice. The larger dog's nose twitched, and in a blur it darted forward, intercepting the man before he could reach the fence. The smaller dog barked, circling, muscles coiled. Officers moved in, restraining the intruder, who struggled violently, screaming curses. "What are you doing?" Lily shouted, her voice shaking. "They're just dogs." "They're not just dogs, Lily," the older agent said sharply, gripping her shoulder. "They're K9s. They can detect things humans can't, and they're trained to protect you. You did the right thing keeping them close." The first intruder had been pinned against the snow, officers restraining him with careful, practiced movements. A third shadow emerged near the back fence, crouched low, a hand on what looked like a metal device. The smaller dog barked sharply, sensing the danger before anyone else. The officers froze, weapons raised, as the dog's instincts led them to the object, a small, crude explosive wired with a remote trigger. Lily's breath caught. "Explosion," she whispered, clutching the larger dog's fur. One officer knelt beside the device, carefully assessing it. "It's live," he murmured. "Could have gone off any time. If she hadn't brought the dogs inside last night, this house, your daughter, it would have been gone." Lily's mother wrapped her arms around her, whispering, "Oh my God, you saved us. You saved them and you saved us." The dogs, sensing the immediate danger had passed but not letting their guard down, returned to Lily's side. The larger one rested its head on her lap, muscles still coiled like a spring, eyes bright and alert. The smaller one pressed against her chest, still trembling slightly but determined to stay close. Lily hugged them both, realizing with a mixture of awe and fear that she had done more than save them, had saved her too. The older agent stood, voice tight but firm. "We'll need to take the dogs for safety. They'll be secured until the threat is neutralized. You've done everything right, Lily, but this house, your neighborhood, isn't safe right now." Lily's small hands clenched their collars. "No, they can't leave me. They stayed with me. They protected me." The agent softened slightly, seeing the bond she had with the dogs. "I know," he said quietly, "and that bond, it's incredible, but we have to keep you safe. They'll be back. They'll come visit." Outside, snow continued to fall, heavy and relentless. The threat had been momentarily contained, but the world beyond Lily's porch had changed forever. Criminals who had stolen elite K9s, capable of detecting explosives and tracking humans, knew exactly where they were. And now, because of Lily's small act of kindness, because she had opened her door to 2 freezing dogs, she had become an unlikely pivot in a high-stakes chase she didn't yet understand. Hours later, after the intruders had been taken away and the explosive disarmed, officers set up a temporary perimeter around the house. They moved with a quiet efficiency, cordoning off the yard, checking for any additional threats. Lily sat in the living room, the dogs curled against her sides, exhaustion finally catching up. Her mother sat beside her, hand in hand, both of them shaking. Lily's mind wandered back to the tattoos on the dog's fur, the numbers, symbols, and faded markings. "They're not just dogs," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. They're something else." The older agent standing near the window gave a small nod of agreement. "Elite," he said softly, "and now, because of you, they're alive. You've done something extraordinary, Lily. You have no idea how extraordinary." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the evidence of the night's events. The street seemed quiet once more, but Lily knew, deep down, it wasn't over. The world beyond her porch had eyes now. Shadows still lingered, and the dogs, her loyal, brave companions, were her shield against it all. As night fell, the neighborhood lights flickered against the whitened streets. Lily hugged the dogs tightly, whispering into their fur, "We'll be okay, we'll be okay." But in the cold, distant wind, there was a sense of lingering danger. Someone had wanted these dogs, someone had tried to take them, and somewhere out there they were still watching. Lily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the day, the cold, the fear, and the bond that had formed between her and the dogs. They had survived the night together, and they would face the next challenge together. But one question lingered in her mind, heavy and urgent. Who had stolen these dogs, and how far would they go to get them back? The first light of dawn barely cut through the gray clouds, casting long, cold shadows across Lily's snow-covered yard. The police perimeter was still in place, officers moving in cautious, measured steps. Lily sat between the 2 dogs, blankets draped around their shivering bodies, still processing the events of the night. Her mother's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent reminder that someone was there. But the air outside was thick with tension, too quiet, too measured. Suddenly, a sharp crack of ice against wood shattered the fragile calm. Lily's heart jumped. The larger dog sprang to its paws instantly, muscles coiled, ears pinned forward. The smaller dog barked sharply, circling her legs, growls vibrating low in its chest. Officers moved toward the source, weapons ready, breath visible in the frosty air. 2 figures darted from the tree line at the far end of the yard. Their movements were careful but desperate, boots slipping on the icy snow. One carried a duffel bag, the other something small and metallic that gleamed even in the muted morning light. The dogs barked again, a synchronized warning that sent a ripple of adrenaline through everyone in the yard. "Freeze," an officer shouted, "hands where we can see them." The larger dog surged forward, not attacking recklessly, but intercepting the intruder carrying the duffel bag. The man stumbled on the ice, yelping as the dog's weight pinned him just enough to prevent escape. The smaller dog lunged toward the second man, who dropped the metallic object and raised his hands. Officers swarmed, restraining both men with professional precision. Lily's mother grabbed her hand tightly. "Oh my God, she whispered. Her voice shook with a mixture of fear, relief, and disbelief. Lily clutched the dogs, her small hands trembling. She had known they were brave, but seeing them in action, protecting her, intercepting armed intruders, was almost too much to process. An officer bent down to inspect the metallic object the second man had dropped. His face went pale as he carefully lifted it. "Explosive," he said grimly. "C4, wired to a remote trigger." Lily's stomach dropped. "Explosion," she whispered, voice barely audible. The larger dog pressed its nose into her chest, almost as if sensing the fear in her. The officer nodded slowly. If you hadn't brought the dogs inside last night, this house, your family, it would have been gone, all of it. Her mother pulled her close, holding her as tears slid down both their faces. Lily hugged the dogs tighter, feeling their warmth seep into her frozen body. She realized something profound. She hadn't just saved the dogs. They had saved her. They had saved her home. And they had done it instinctively, with intelligence and bravery far beyond anything she could have imagined. The older agent stepped forward, surveying the scene. "We need to get these dogs secured for safety," he said, voice tight but calm. "They're elite K9s. They can't stay here in the house, there's too much risk, but they've bonded with her. That bond, it's rare. It's why they're alive." Lily shook her head violently. "No, they can't leave me. They stayed with me all night. They saved me." The agent's expression softened slightly. "I know, kid, I know, but if we take them, it will be temporary, you'll see them. And you need to be safe, too." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the street in white. The stolen K9's handlers had been captured, the explosive neutralized, but the neighborhood was far from safe. The officers secured the perimeter, scanning the tree line for any remaining threats. Every shadow, every flake of snow, seemed alive with potential danger. Lily hugged the dogs once more, brushing ice from their fur. She studied the faded tattoos, the numbers, symbols, realizing that these markings were more than identifiers. They were proof of training, proof of survival, proof that the dogs had endured far more than any ordinary animal. She marveled at their courage, their instinct, and their unwavering loyalty. Then one officer spoke quietly into a radio, tension heavy in his voice. "Perimeter clear. No additional threats spotted. Suspects apprehended. Dogs secured temporarily for assessment." The words brought a mix of relief and dread. Relief because the immediate danger had passed. Dread because Lily knew this wasn't the end. The criminals had wanted these dogs badly enough to steal, threaten, and arm themselves with explosives. They would not stop. And somewhere out there, others were already aware of the dog's location. The older agent knelt beside Lily again, voice low and urgent. "You did something extraordinary," he said. "You saw two freezing animals and you did what no one else would have done. You saved them, and in doing so, you saved lives. That takes courage beyond your years." Lily looked at the dogs, whose muscles were finally relaxing, tails slowly wagging, eyes bright and intelligent. They stayed," she whispered, "even when it was dangerous." "They did," the agent confirmed. "And because of that, they're alive. And because of you, they're alive. You understand that?" Lily nodded slowly, still clinging to the larger dog's fur. She didn't fully understand the complexities of federal K9 units, stolen property, or explosives. She didn't need to. She knew one undeniable truth. The dogs had trusted her, and she had trusted them. Together, they had survived something bigger than either of them could have faced alone. The sun rose higher, reflecting off the snow and illuminating the officers as they moved efficiently around the yard. The neighborhood, once quiet and familiar, had been transformed into a scene of high-stakes law enforcement activity. Cameras, flashlights, and radios filled the air. News vans began arriving, and reporters whispered in hushed tones about hero dogs and brave little girl saves lives. Lily's mother hugged her tightly, sobbing. "I don't know how you did it," she said. "I don't know how you stayed so brave." Lily hugged the dogs again, her small body shaking. They stayed with me," she said. "They didn't leave. They saved me." The officer smiled softly, eyes glinting with admiration. "And you saved them. That's the incredible part. You were brave for them and they were brave for you. It's a bond most people will never understand." Hours later, after the scene had been secured and the suspects taken away in handcuffs, the dogs were finally led away for temporary safety. Lily's eyes welled with tears as the larger dog paused, turning back to lick her cheek, the smaller dog nuzzling her gently. They were leaving, but the connection was unbreakable. Lily's mother whispered into her ear, voice full of awe and pride. "You did something extraordinary, Lily. Remember that. You and those dogs, you're heroes." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the street in quiet white. The neighborhood had survived, thanks to a little girl and two extraordinary dogs. But even as Lily watched them disappear from view, she knew the world beyond her home had changed forever. Somewhere in the distance, unmarked cars and dark figures waited, observing. The dogs had survived, the threat had been neutralized, but the criminals had not been fully caught. The battle for these elite canines and the lives they protected was far from over. Lily sat on the porch, hugging her mother, watching the snow fall. Her heart was full of relief, love, and a lingering fear. She didn't yet know what the future held, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The dogs had chosen her, and she had chosen them. Together, they had survived a night of unimaginable danger. Together, they had changed the course of events no one else could have imagined. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, someone was already planning their next move. By late morning, the neighborhood had transformed from sleepy suburbia into a surreal scene of controlled chaos. News vans lined the curb, cameras pointed toward Lily's house, microphones poised to capture the story of a little girl and two extraordinary dogs. Reporters whispered into phones, jotting notes furiously. Word of hero dogs and the brave little girl who saved them spread like wildfire on social media before anyone had even left the scene. Lily sat in the living room, wrapped in a thick blanket, the larger dog resting its head on her lap while the smaller one pressed against her chest. Officers moved quietly through the house, checking locks, inspecting the perimeter, and speaking in low tones about suspect containment and federal protocols. Lily's mother sat beside her, still holding her trembling hands. The adrenaline from last night's events had worn off, leaving exhaustion, fear, and disbelief. "They said the dogs are elite K9s," Lily whispered to her mother, voice barely audible. "They weren't just stray dogs." Her mother nodded, still processing. "I know, baby, I know. They're trained, dangerous in the wrong hands, but you kept them safe." Tears glistened in her eyes. "You did something no one else could." The older agent returned, kneeling in front of Lily once more. His expression was serious but softened by a hint of admiration. "Lily, the dogs you helped, they're not just any dogs. They're federal K9s, detection, explosive, search operations. The people who took them, they're part of a criminal network. If you hadn't brought them inside, if you hadn't kept them safe, they could have been lost forever, and others could have been hurt." Lily's eyes widened. "Others?" she asked. "Yes," he said softly. "People who rely on these dogs, officers, civilians, could have been in danger, but your bravery saved lives." The dogs stirred, sensing the urgency in the agent's voice. The larger one sat upright, ears pricked, tail wagging slightly but alert. The smaller dog shifted, muscles coiled, eyes focused on the front window. They had been through more than Lily could imagine, but their bond with her made them steady, protective, almost invincible in her eyes. Outside, uniformed officers began directing neighbors away from the street. Snow continued to fall, now lighter, softer, almost serene in its contrast to the chaos it covered. But Lily could feel it in the air. Danger had not passed completely. Someone had tried to take these dogs, and somewhere, eyes were still watching. News crews approached the perimeter, whispering questions about heroic kids and police dog rescues. Lily stayed on the couch, arms around the dogs, feeling the weight of the media presence but unable to leave their side. Each bark, each nuzzle, each shift reminded her of the night's terror and the courage that had saved her home. One officer gently suggested it was time for the dogs to be secured for assessment. "They're trained," he explained. "We can't leave them here unsupervised." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "No," she cried. "They can't go. They stayed with me. They saved me." The larger dog pressed its nose into her lap, seemingly agreeing. The smaller one whimpered softly, nudging her cheek. The officer knelt to her level, voice calm but firm. "I know, kid, and they'll come back. We can't keep them here tonight, but they'll be safe. You did the right thing keeping them with you last night. That bond, it's extraordinary. They're alive because of you." Hours passed. Officers carefully moved the dogs into a secure vehicle, ensuring Lily and her mother could watch but not interfere. The dogs paused before leaving, tails wagging slightly, eyes lingering on Lily. The larger dog pressed its nose against her hand, licking gently. The smaller dog nuzzled her cheek. It was a silent promise. They would return. Lily hugged them one last time, whispering, "Be safe, be safe." Her small voice trembled, but the dog's calm, steady presence gave her courage. They had been her shield, and she had been theirs. By mid-afternoon, the street quieted, leaving only the soft rustle of snow against the sidewalks. News vans remained, reporters murmuring about the bravery of the young girl and the heroic dogs. Lily's story spread quickly, shared on social media feeds, turning her into an overnight sensation. But even as cameras faded, Lily's heart remained heavy. She had seen the criminal intent behind the theft of these dogs. She had witnessed the explosive threat firsthand. Somewhere out there, the network that had stolen the K9s and who had tried to harm her was still planning. And the knowledge that she had become a key part of this story, even unwittingly, weighed on her small shoulders. That evening, the older agent returned once more, this time with a gentler demeanor. "Lily," he said softly, "the dogs are safe tonight and you're safe too. But you should know the criminals we're dealing with are sophisticated. They knew what they were after. You've already helped us a lot by keeping them alive." Lily nodded, hugging her mother. I didn't want them to be cold. I didn't want them to be alone." "That's what makes you brave," the agent replied. "Most people wouldn't have risked themselves. You did, and they trust you because of that. That's rare." The night fell softly over the Harper home, snow continuing to coat the neighborhood in quiet white. Lily and her mother huddled together in the living room, the house finally still, though not truly calm. The streets outside were quiet, but shadows lingered. Somewhere, the criminals' plans were still unfolding. The dogs were safe for now, but Lily knew instinctively that this wasn't over. She closed her eyes, imagining the dogs' steady breathing, their watchful eyes, their protective instincts. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering fear. The world had been bigger and more dangerous than she ever imagined, but she had survived it. And the dogs, her guardians, her companions, had survived it with her. Somewhere deep in the shadows beyond the perimeter, unmarked vehicles idled quietly. Eyes watched the house, scanning for movement, waiting for a chance. Lily didn't know it yet, but the story wasn't finished. The dogs were heroes, yes, but the criminals had not been fully captured. And the moment they discovered the dogs' location had been compromised, the stakes would rise again. Lily finally fell asleep on the couch, blankets around her, the dogs safely tucked in secure kennels nearby for the night. Their eyes, visible through the glass doors, glimmered with intelligence and loyalty. They had survived because of her, but they had also saved her. And as she drifted into a restless sleep, a single thought ran through her mind. This was only the beginning. The night was unusually quiet, almost deceptive, as snow fell in a thick, muffling blanket over Lily's neighborhood. Inside the Harper home, the warmth from the fireplace cast long shadows across the walls, flickering over photographs and furniture that had remained untouched since the morning's chaos. Lily sat curled on the couch, blanket around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the glass doors that revealed the snow-covered street. Her mother tried to read a book beside her, but the tension lingered in the air, invisible but palpable. Somewhere in the distance, unmarked vehicles prowled silently along the edges of the neighborhood. The earlier arrests had slowed the criminals' efforts, but intelligence suggested this was not the end. They were organized, desperate, and they had already shown they were willing to use violence to reclaim the elite K9s. Lily's small hands trembled as she traced the patterns in the snow outside. She thought of the two dogs resting in secure kennels nearby. Even behind the locked gates, the larger dog's keen eyes seemed to track every movement, muscles tensed in perpetual readiness. The smaller one whimpered softly, but the intelligence in its gaze made Lily shiver. These weren't ordinary pets, they were her protectors, trained to detect danger that humans could not even sense. Suddenly, the subtle hum of an engine outside caught the attention of the officers stationed around the perimeter. Heads turned in unison, weapons raised, eyes scanning the darkness. A van, black, unmarked, moving slowly, crept toward the neighborhood entrance. The officers' radios crackled to life with hushed urgency. Movement detected, approaching the perimeter, possible hostile intent. Inside the house, Lily's larger dog lifted its head, ears pricked, tail stiff. The smaller dog barked sharply, growls low in its chest. Lily instinctively clutched their collars. She didn't need to understand the officers' technical warnings. She could feel the tension radiating from the dogs. Danger was coming. The black van stopped at the end of the street. Two masked figures emerged, heavy boots crunching on the icy snow. One carried a bag over his shoulder, the other a long, metallic object that reflected the streetlights in harsh glints. The officers surrounding the house moved with precise coordination, forming a defensive perimeter, radios crackling with orders. Inside, Lily pressed herself against the glass doors, heart hammering, hands shaking. The larger dog moved in front of her, muscles taut, tail bristling, eyes locked on the intruders. The smaller dog circled her feet, low growls vibrating through the floorboards. She whispered softly to them, almost as if the words themselves could guide their instincts. "Be careful, be careful." The first figure advanced, crouched low, attempting stealthy movement. The larger dog surged forward instantly, controlled and precise, intercepting the man before he could approach closer. Teeth bared but not biting, muscles coiled to block any sudden movements. The smaller dog barked sharply, circling, herding the second intruder toward the street, preventing him from reaching the house. "Freeze!" an officer shouted from the perimeter, voice loud and commanding. The intruders paused, weapons raised hesitantly. But the dog's presence added a level of intimidation they hadn't anticipated. Their movements, synchronized and precise, disrupted any plan the criminals had. Lily's mother gasped, gripping her daughter's shoulder. They're protecting us," she whispered, eyes wide. The officer who had been closest to Lily and the dogs approached, kneeling near the door. "They're K9s, he explained softly. "Elite detection. They know danger before we do. They're keeping you safe." The intruders panicked. The larger dog growled, low and commanding, teeth bared, ready to strike. The smaller dog barked relentlessly, circling, forcing the second man to retreat. One officer moved in quickly, restraining the first intruder while others surrounded the second. The black van's engine roared suddenly as a third figure attempted to flee, only to be intercepted by a coordinated team of officers and, unexpectedly, the two dogs. The larger dog lunged, blocking escape with precise timing, muscles springing and coiling to hold him in place. The smaller dog nipped at his boots, forcing him into submission. Lily watched, heart pounding, as her protectors executed moves she had only seen in movies, agile, fearless, intelligent. The chaos was over almost as quickly as it had started. The intruders were restrained, weapons seized, and the officers radioed for backup to transport the criminals safely. Snow continued to fall, dusting the scene in an eerie, quiet white. Lily hugged the larger dog, pressing her face into its fur. The smaller one nuzzled her cheek, tail wagging slowly now that the immediate threat had passed. You saved us," Lily whispered, tears in her eyes. "All of us." The older agent knelt beside her, voice filled with awe. "No, Lily, you saved them. They followed you because they trusted you. And because you acted bravely, they kept everyone safe. That's rare. That bond, it's extraordinary. Heroes like them don't come along often. Heroes like you, even less so." The news crews, who had been waiting at a safe distance, began filming the aftermath. Stories would spread across the nation, highlighting a little girl whose bravery had kept elite police dogs alive and averted a potential disaster. Lily felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. She hadn't sought recognition. She had only wanted to help two shivering, freezing animals survive the night. But as she watched the officers secure the dogs in specialized vehicles for transport to a federal K-9 unit, she realized something profound. The bond she shared with them couldn't be replaced, and no distance, no protocol, could sever the connection they had forged in a single night of snow, fear, and instinctive bravery. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering in awe, "You were amazing, Lily, absolutely amazing." Lily glanced at the dogs, who paused, looking back at her with eyes that seemed to speak more than words ever could. They had survived a night of terror, fended off trained criminals, and protected her family. And in that silent, frozen moment, she understood something important. Courage wasn't just about facing danger. Courage was about choosing to act, even when you were small, afraid, and unsure. Outside, the black van that had attempted the incursion sat empty, snow covering the tire tracks as though the night's events had never happened. But Lily knew better. Somewhere beyond the quiet, unmarked vehicle still waited, the criminal network watching, planning, and ready to strike again. And she knew, instinctively, that the dogs would always be ready. They would always protect her. Hours later, as the dogs were loaded into federal transport and driven away, Lily waved goodbye, tears streaming down her cheeks. She pressed her hands to the glass, whispering softly, "Be safe, I'll see you again." The larger dog pressed its nose to the window, the smaller one nudged its paw against the glass. A silent promise passed between them, loyalty, trust, and unbreakable connection. Lily would never forget this night, nor the courage of two extraordinary animals who had changed the course of her life forever. And somewhere in the shadows, the criminals who had tried and failed to reclaim the elite K-9s were already plotting their next move, unaware that the smallest act of kindness, bravery, and trust had turned the tide against them. For Lily, the snow continued to fall softly outside her window. Inside, she felt warmth, safety, and the undeniable knowledge that courage could come in any form, sometimes small, sometimes furry, and sometimes found in the eyes of a loyal companion. The Harper house was quiet now, unusually so, with the snow outside blanketing the world in soft white silence. The adrenaline, the fear, the chaos of the past days had ebbed, leaving a fragile calm. But inside Lily, the little girl who had opened her door to two freezing dogs, felt a storm of emotions: pride, relief, exhaustion, and a quiet, simmering awareness that the world had shifted for her forever. Her mother sat beside her on the couch, holding her hand, eyes red from tears and sleepless nights. "You did something extraordinary, Lily," she whispered, voice full of awe. "Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did. You saved lives. You saved them." Lily's small hands rested on the blanket covering her knees. I didn't want them to be cold," she murmured. "I didn't want them to be alone. They trusted me." Her mother squeezed her hand gently. "And you trusted them. That's what made the difference. That bond between you and those dogs, it's rare, it's special. It saved all of us." The sound of engines outside broke the quiet. Federal K-9 handlers had returned, arriving to formally retrieve the dogs. Lily's heart sank slightly at the thought of them leaving, even though she knew they were in good hands. She wrapped herself in the blanket, peering out the window as the larger dog's golden eyes caught hers through the glass. The smaller dog nudged the door gently, as if sensing her sadness. The handlers approached with care. "These are extraordinary animals," one said, voice soft but firm. "And so is the girl who kept them alive. They're going to be safe now, and they'll continue their work. But the bond you've formed, that's something no one can replicate." Lily's chest tightened. She wanted to reach for them, to keep them with her forever, but she understood the reality. These dogs had missions, duties far beyond a single household. And yet, their loyalty, their courage, and their quiet intelligence had left an indelible mark on her life. The larger dog stepped forward first, placing its head against the glass of the transport crate. Lily pressed her hands to the window, feeling the warmth of its fur through the cool glass. The smaller dog followed, nudging her gently with its nose. A silent connection passed between them, trust, gratitude, and a shared understanding that transcended words. One handler knelt, brushing the larger dog's head. "They know you," he said, "and they'll remember you. This little girl was their saving grace." Lily whispered softly, tears streaming down her face. "Be safe, please be safe." The larger dog licked the glass, pawing gently as if to promise she would never be forgotten. The crates were secured in the specialized transport vehicles. Engines hummed, doors closed, and for a brief moment, Lily felt the weight of loss, the emptiness of the house without her companions. But she also felt pride in the courage she had shown, in the loyalty and intelligence of the dogs, and in the small act of kindness that had grown into something much larger than she could have imagined. Hours later, Lily and her mother were sitting by the fireplace, warm mugs of cocoa in hand. News coverage of the events had gone viral. Social media feeds overflowed with stories of a brave little girl who saved elite police dogs from a potential disaster, capturing the attention of the entire nation. Headlines praised her courage, the dog's heroism, and the incredible bond they had shared. Lily listened quietly, cheeks still wet from tears, and felt a strange sense of humility. She hadn't sought recognition. She had simply acted on instinct. A knock at the door startled her. A federal officer, accompanied by a small team, entered carrying framed certificates and medals. "Lily Harper," the officer began, voice formal but warm, "for your extraordinary bravery, compassion, and quick thinking in rescuing 2 elite federal K-9s, you are being awarded the National K-9 Hero Recognition. These dogs, they survived because of you, and so did countless others." Lily's eyes widened. Her mother gasped, clutching her hand tightly. They're honoring you," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. "Yes," the officer replied. "Your courage, your kindness, and your calm under pressure have inspired everyone who knows this story. You are officially recognized as a civilian hero in the eyes of federal law enforcement." Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks as the medals were pinned to a small ribbon she could wear. She looked toward the fireplace, imagining the dogs beside her. The larger dog would nuzzle her cheek, the smaller one would wag its tail, and together they would remind her that courage could be found in even the smallest of hearts. The day passed with visitors, officers, journalists, and neighbors, each offering congratulations, hugs, and praise. Lily listened quietly, feeling the warmth of community, pride, and recognition. Yet in the back of her mind, she knew the true heroes were not her, but the 2 dogs who had protected her, intercepted armed intruders, and remained calm under pressure when everyone else had faltered. As night fell, Lily and her mother returned to the living room. The fireplace cast a golden glow, flickering across the walls, the same walls that had witnessed terror, courage, and survival. Her mother tucked her into bed, brushing hair from her forehead. "Sleep well, my brave girl," she whispered. "You did something remarkable. You saved lives tonight, and you've changed the course of everything." Lily hugged her blanket tightly, eyes heavy but mind alert with memories of the past days. She thought of the larger dog's golden eyes, the smaller dog's determined nuzzles, and the way they had protected her. A smile crept across her face despite the exhaustion. "I'll see them again," she whispered softly. "I know I will." Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the neighborhood in serene white. The storm of danger had passed, at least for now. The criminals who had stolen the K-9s had been arrested, the explosive devices neutralized, and the dogs were safe in federal care. But the memory of the terror, the thrill of courage, and the bond of trust lingered indelibly in Lily's heart. Weeks later, she received a letter in the mail. The envelope bore the emblem of the federal K-9 unit. Inside was a photograph of the 2 dogs, tails wagging, eyes bright, with a note from the handlers. "To Lily, our hero, thank you for saving us. We will never forget your bravery. We're always watching over you just as you watched over us." Lily held the photograph close, feeling the warmth, loyalty, and courage radiating from the image. She pressed it to her chest and smiled, knowing that the bond she shared with the dogs was unbreakable. She had faced fear, she had acted bravely, and she had changed lives, both human and canine. And in the quiet of her room that night, as snow continued to fall outside, Lily Harper understood a profound truth. Courage wasn't about size, age, or strength. Courage was about heart, trust, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The dogs had chosen her. She had chosen them. Together they had survived the storm. Together they had become heroes. And together their story would inspire countless others for years to come. The wind whispered softly through the trees, a lullaby of snow and quiet. The Harper house was safe. The dogs were safe. And the little girl who had opened her door to two shivering animals had shown the world that even the smallest hearts could make the biggest difference.